I don't need to be the most popular teacher here because I already gave that up, deciding to just teach in treatment because that was something I realized if I was just going to teach in treatment centers and for recovery, I'm not going to be on the cover of Yoga Journal. I'm not going to be the most popular yoga teacher. And I had to let go of that idea that I was somehow going to be in that mix.
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here. And if you are a new listener, welcome. I'm so glad that you somehow stumbled your way into this podcast. I know there are so many podcasts out there in the world, so I am very grateful that anyone who's listening to this is listening to this podcast. I really appreciate you. So the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast was started about a year ago. I try to interview different yoga teachers across the world. Many of them are full-time yoga teachers and some are part-time teachers, talking about their journey of how they became to where they are at in their teaching career, as well as challenges and struggles that we and they might be going through as being a full-time yoga teacher, and also the passions and love for yoga that they have that has kept them going to pursue this path as a full-time yoga teacher or somebody who is just pursuing their career in yoga teaching. So I hope you find these conversations interesting. I tried a new format of shorter 4-part series where I had a conversation with Olga to talk about creative sequencing, and I hope you enjoy that shorter format. But this week we are back with a regular full-length interview format where I am interviewing another full-time yoga teacher to share their journey. I don't have too much of an update to share with you today before we dive into this week's episode, except that I just finished running a full marathon, and this was my first full marathon that I have ran. I have ran half marathons in the past, but this was my first full one. And you know what? I am so tired, but I'm also very happy, excited, proud to have finished my first full marathon. My legs, my feet are sore and it feels like jello. I probably need about a week maybe to recover from this marathon race, but I'm very happy to have completed this goal that I had set up for myself 20 weeks ago and been training for the past 20 weeks to get ready for this marathon. So it was a beautiful day. I did it. I'm happy. And that is one of the reasons I'm going to keep the intro short, because I probably need to rest and go to sleep a lot sooner than usual today so I can recover. So today I'm joined by an incredible guest, Brian Hyman, a yoga teacher, meditation instructor, and author whose work focuses on addiction recovery and transformation. Brian has been sober since 2009 and has spent over a decade teaching at Cliffside, Malibu, which is a leading treatment center for addiction recovery. His book, Recovery with Yoga, was just published by Shambhala, and his meditation courses are on Insight Timers, where it has reached over 1 million play. And in the conversation, we dive into his journey of how he became a yoga teacher and how his yoga teaching career path evolved, as well as he shares some great tips for yoga teachers and some great inspirations. So I hope you will enjoy this conversation I had with Brian, and I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Brian, for coming to join me on the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm so excited that I get to have this conversation with you and get to know you. So please tell the listener, where are you joining us from today?
Hi, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I love this offering that you have, the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. It was something that wasn't out there when I started teaching about 14 years ago. So I love that this is available to any new teachers that are starting out, that want to find out how to teach, how to start their own career, whatever it might be. So this is an amazing thing you're doing. So thank you for allowing me to share. I am in Thousand Oaks, California, about an hour or so north of Los Angeles.
I see. And is that where you're from? Are you from California? Where are you originally from?
Originally, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And when I was 24, I moved to New York City. I stayed there until I was about 30. That's where I actually first started practicing yoga. I came out to LA when I was about 30 and continued to practice yoga and started teaching about 5 or 6 years later. So now I'm stuck in California as a yoga teacher. I'm joking. I love it here. That's just where my journey took me was out here, and I live out here. I'm here with my daughter and my career and where I work, and we just talked before we started recording. I'm out in the mountains, and I just have a really peaceful place to live. So I'm really blessed. So out in California, but I started on the East Coast.
Okay, so it sounds like you started practicing yoga while you're in New York, but you became a teacher in LA. Is that correct?
Correct. I started taking classes because they were offered in the building where I lived in New York City. In the basement, we had a fitness room and we had access to classes. I used to go and just use the weights and the machines to work out. And then one night, the yoga teacher was there. I didn't know who she was. So my friend asked me, "Are you going to take the yoga class?" And I said something like, "No, why would I do that?" And I looked over, and this woman had this funny look on her face. And I happened to realize in the moment, I said, "You're the yoga teacher, aren't you?" And she said, "I am." I said, "You know what? Fine, I'll try it." Because I had tried it here and there in the past. It was always, to me, just fitness, stretching. It was a class at the gym. And so I took her class, and there was really something different about it. I don't think yoga changed. I don't think it's ever changed. I think what had happened was I had changed. I was in a place in my life where I was open to what was being shared. I was finally open to feeling things in my body a different way and listening to what a teacher had to share in a different way. So I really liked that class. I went every week and did that for a couple of years. And that's when I moved out to LA and picked up my practice out here on the West Coast.
What made you move to LA?
I was in a place in my life where I just felt stuck. I was big part of my story is I'm sober, so addiction recovery. I was still alcoholic. I was still drinking. I wasn't sober yet in New York. So even though I was practicing yoga and starting to get a taste of what it was to start to feel things and hear and see and experience things from a yogic perspective, I wasn't really able to grasp that just yet. So I moved to LA as almost an escape. I thought New York was closing in on me. I felt like my life there was miserable. It was loud. It was energetic. I felt like my career at the time, I was trying to be a creative type, meaning an actor and a writer, and just nothing was happening for me there. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to get out of here. So I thought, let me go to LA. Let me just see if I can get something going there. But the problem was the person I was in New York, I took with me to LA. So everything was still the same. What had happened was I brought my addiction with me. I brought my negative attitude with me, my depression with me, my anxiety, my fear, my anger. It all came with me. So I came out to LA originally to try to get a new perspective, but that didn't happen until I finally found sobriety. And so originally it was an idea to escape, to try to see if I can get some work out here. And when I landed, it was exactly what I needed. This is a big part of my story. This is where I found my recovery, which led me to being a teacher. So I'm not sure if I would have found it if I hadn't left New York. So whatever got me out of New York, I'm glad. I love my time there, but it led me here. So it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, and in LA, when you first started to practice yoga, do you remember any studios or teachers that you were practicing with?
Absolutely. So I had no money and I didn't have any desire to go join a yoga studio. I didn't know anything about studios. I thought studios were for the elite, the advanced yoga masters, the people who are real yogis. And that's not what I felt like. I didn't have much self-esteem, self-confidence, no sense of self-worth. as a reminder, I was still, very deep in my addiction. So when someone is actively drinking or using drugs or acting out in similar behaviors, there's a secrecy there. There's a loneliness. There's an isolation, a desperation, a solitude. And so I happened to hear about some classes outside, free or donation based, at a park in Los Angeles. And that worked for me because I can go there, I can hide amongst the crowd outside, I could put a few dollars into the basket, and I can leave. I don't have to check in, I don't have to sign in, I don't have to be part of anything. It wasn't really a community, at least that's not how I saw it. I saw it as a way to just get my fix, get my yoga fix, and get out of there. So I started practicing at a park in, in Los Angeles, and they had classes there. God bless them. It was when I finally did get sober, when I started teaching, I wrote a very personal email to the person who created those classes to express my gratitude, because I'm not sure, it was a big part of my mental health. It was a big part of my life because the classes were 7 days a week, every day. And that's when I went every day. So at least once a day, one time a day, I had somewhere to go, somewhere to be where I felt safe and part of something. So it was those classes in LA at the park. That's how I started. Eventually, I ended up going to a bunch of studios and a bunch of gyms, and I tried everything and every style, but that comes later.
Thank you for sharing that. And I live in Long Beach. In Long Beach, we're quite known for a thing called Yoga on the Bluff, and it's very similar. Her name is Dharma. She started it many, many years ago, where she offers free yoga on the little grass area right above the beach in Long Beach, and it's free. It's every day from 11 o'clock. And so many people come from all walks of life, and people bring their beach towels, or some people don't have any yoga mat. They just do it on the grass, and people bring their dogs and their kids. And it's donation based, and there's no pressure to donate either. And it's quite magical to see how many people gather together to practice yoga. And it really breaks down the barrier to entry for a lot of people to practice yoga, because sometimes walking in the studio just feels like it's too intimidating, or you just don't feel like you're welcomed in that space. So I feel like it's so amazing that there's people who's offering donation-based yoga in the public spaces like that, because it really gives people opportunity to try. And like you said, you can just show up and have place to go and feel welcome.
Yeah, and you don't have to commit. You don't have to step out of your comfort zone all that much. And it was such a huge part of my getting into yoga here in California. I never forgot that. So a big part of my intention with being a teacher was to make the healing benefits of yoga accessible and affordable to anyone in need. And I still do it today. I have a lot of free recordings and courses and a lot of things online that are free. I have created classes like that at parks and churches in different communities, twice out in LA and then once out here where I'm living now. I've never forgotten how important that was for me. And so I never want to forget that. I usually do that every year, every 2 years. I'll create something for 6 months or so, and I'll teach it for a while, and then maybe get another teacher to come in and just have that community offering. I think it's huge.
Yeah, definitely. When did you first realize that you wanted to become a yoga teacher?
I never did.
Oh, really?
It was never my choice.
Oh,
This is the kind of the fun part of the interview, or at least one thing that I was thinking, if I were to talk about this, was it was never my idea to become a yoga teacher. I came to LA to try to resurrect a failed acting career in New York. I wanted to be a painter and a photographer and an artist and a Renaissance man. And then all of a sudden, I'm hope to die drunk in LA, and I'm taking yoga classes. But I got sober, and as part of my recovery, I was doing yoga every day. I did start to go to classes at a gym at this time, in addition to the classes at the park. And one of the teachers at the gym, she saw something in me that I hadn't yet just saw it within. I hadn't seen it within myself yet. And she would help me after class, and she would, like a mentor, she would start to say, "Hey, can you do this pose? I'm just curious." And I would do it. And she would say, "How can you do that? Where did you learn that?" And I would say, "I don't know. She goes, "That's not normal. You shouldn't be able to do that. How long have you been practicing? And I would say, I don't know. I used to take classes, in New York, or I didn't think I had to practice. I didn't know what that meant. I just thought I was taking classes at the gym. For me, it was a way to just pass time. It was an hour just to kind of get out of my head. And so this teacher kept helping me. She would say, let me show you this. Do you know how to do a handstand? Do you know how to do this plank? Do you know how to do that? And she is the one who first dropped the seed. She said, I think you're going to be a teacher one day. She said this to me, and I said something like this in response. I said, why would you say that? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. That was it. And then about 9 months into my recovery, I happened to have a conversation with a couple of guys who had more time sober than me. And they asked me, they said, what do you do? I said, what do you mean? They said, for work. And I said, well, nothing. I've just been trying to get sober. I've been collecting unemployment. I've been working as a waiter at a restaurant. I've been working extra jobs in different TV commercials. And they said, okay, well, are you working now? I said, no, I just been working on getting sober. I've been going to meetings. I've been just going to therapy. I've been reading books. I've been meditating. And they said, well, it's time for you to get a job. I said, well, I don't know what I want to do. And they said, what do you like? And the only thing that I could think of was, I like yoga. And that's what I said. And they said, just do that. And it was that simple. And so I put that together, that conversation with what my teacher had said, that you're going to be a yoga teacher one day. So I called her up after that conversation with those guys. And I called her and I said, can I ask you about something? She goes, are you ready? I said, what do you, she goes, are you ready to be a teacher? I said, and it was so strange. She knew what I was calling about. I said, yeah, I think so. She goes, I knew it. And then she starts telling me, okay, you got to take this class. You got to read this book. You got to take this course, do this. And she walked me through the whole thing. It was incredible. And it was the best accident or mistake or coincidence that ever happened in my life.
And what teacher training did you take?
That's another thing so in order to take a teacher training, I thought, okay, so I'm going to pay a lot of money and spend a lot of time with someone. I better make sure they have what I want. There has to be something that I need to be able to sit with this person 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I want to make sure it's someone that I really want to learn from. So I ended up taking classes with every teacher I could in Los Angeles at the time that had a teacher training program. And I couldn't find someone that I liked. So I almost gave up. And I called my friend, the teacher, and I said, I can't find a training program. And she goes, hold on a second. You've taken all the classes, nobody you like? I said, no, I can't imagine sitting with any of these teachers. No offense. It's just personally, I just didn't feel any connection to the teachings. And she goes, I just took a workshop out in Joshua Tree with this guy. I think you should look him up. And she gave me the name of the teacher. So he was teaching at a studio that weekend. I went, and the rest is history. As soon as he started talking and guiding the class and the group, I thought, yeah, this is what I want. I want to do it like he's doing it. I want this.
And if you don't mind sharing the name of the teacher.
Oh, sorry. I should plug my first teacher, Saul David Ray.
And what do you think about his teaching or his energy that you were just like, this is it?
I think it is what you just shared. It's energy. It's what somebody brings into the room. You can, before they even open their mouth to speak, there's just something about the way we hold ourselves when we're practicing. He had been practicing and teaching for 20 plus years at that point. It wasn't about vinyasa flow. It wasn't about the anatomy, the physiology, the kinesiology, the philosophy, the psychology. There was a lot of that stuff. I didn't even know what it was, but there was a lot of stuff. I later figured out that it was a mix of all these different things. What I loved was it was such a welcoming space he created for whoever was in the room. It was a safe space. He played music on the harmonium, which I hadn't seen yet. And we weren't doing the typical sort of sun salutation, vinyasa flow, warrior one, warrior two, triangle, half, whatever it might be that most other studios and most other teachers were doing in the area at the time. All I can remember is we did crescent pose and we did maybe a pigeon pose. And that was all I can remember. I don't remember doing a sequence. I don't remember doing a peak pose. I don't remember much, except there was something about that. I thought, yeah, I like that. It's it was authentic and it was present. He was in the moment and he wasn't trying to sell me anything. And I felt like I was co-creating in that space as a student, which was really powerful for me because at the time, especially with someone in early recovery, we don't really feel so sure of ourselves. But in that room with that teacher, I thought, I feel welcome here. He makes me feel like I have something to offer the world here. So I sent him a message too when I got sober, thanking him. I've reached out to everyone. It's just something I've done in my recovery because sometimes people don't know, they don't know. And I don't think they need to know, but I love to share that from my heart that what somebody said, what somebody did completely changed my life. Even my teacher friend, I called her after that, all these years later. I said, remember when you told me I was going to be a teacher? And we laugh about it now because we're still friends. I said, you have no idea how that changed my life. And I sent her a copy of my book when it came out last year. And it's neat to have a kind of history with people. And it's all little tiny moments. Somebody said this, somebody did that, somebody taught a class, and all of a sudden it's like, yep, that's the person. Yep, that's the thing. That's the class. That's the style. That's the music.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So did you travel to Joshua Tree for this teacher training? And how, or was the teacher living in LA? Okay. And how long was it your teacher training?
Oh, well, he was teaching at a beautiful yoga studio, Exhale Center for Sacred Movement. This was in Venice Beach about 2010, 2011. And it's no longer there, but at the time for me, it was a lightning in a bottle moment. So it was Annie Carpenter, Sean Korn, Shiva Ray, Eric Schiffman, Saul David Ray. It was amazing teachers, world-class, world-renowned teachers that taught internationally that were all here in this one studio teaching weekly classes. And I happened to be in this area at this time. And so on any given day, I'm taking classes with these amazing teachers. So I actually took his class there and the training was there as well. So we trained at that studio and we went to the beach. We were right next to the beach. So we'd walk out to the beach. We'd do our breathing in the morning and meditation out there. We'd go back into the studio and I'd be back out to the beach. We'd take a break for lunch, walk around the area. And so it was all there in Venice Beach at Exhale.
Amazing. Sounds like, I mean, I heard of Excel many times because Annie Carpenter used to teach there, like you said, and I heard many teachers talk about Excel times and how, how wonderful teachers work there. I feel like that is such a great time as a yoga practitioner and teacher to be in LA that time. I feel like there's all this amazing teachers or teaching group classes. Nowadays you have to kind of travel to try to take their classes, or some of them are not really teaching public classes anymore. So I feel like that's the good time to be in LA if you're a yoga practitioner. But
Mhm.
okay, so you did your 200. How long was it? How many months? How was it intensive? And also, like, did you start teaching right away? What happened after the teacher training?
That first 200-hour teaching was structured as an immersion. It was two modules. We did 10 or 11 days in, this is 2010. It was around September, I think. And then we took a month off. So we did a 10 to 12, 14 hours a day, 10 days in a row. Had a month off. And then we did another 10, 12-hour days about a month later. So we completed the 200 hours that way, plus other things, teacher uh, uh, type things. We assisted classes. We self-taught. So we did a lot of extra things to get some more hours. So we did that, and I started teaching almost immediately. And again, it wasn't my choice. I did want to teach, and I specifically wanted to make it accessible and make it affordable. And being newly sober, I really wanted to reach out to the people in my community who were in recovery. And my original thought was to offer yoga in those spaces, but I also needed experience. So I also wanted to teach in different types of places. So I started teaching probably about a month or two after I finished my first training.
Was your intention, I guess you said it wasn't really your choice, but what was it your intention to want to make this your main gig, main job, main thing that you do, main source of income? Was that something you thought about when you were in your teacher training or when you graduated and started teaching?
No, this is where all of the things I was reading and studying about spirituality and yoga philosophy, I picked it up in the Bhagavad Gita. I picked it up in addiction recovery, that we have no attachment to results, no non-attachment. We just focus on the action, and the results are up to God, the universe, whatever you want to call that. Um, so if I just keep doing the next right thing, if I trust the process, I should be guided. So I really believed in that. So I never had a 5 year or 10 year plan. It was just finish the training. What are you doing after the training? I don't know. I'm not thinking that far ahead. I'm just going to do the training. And each little step just kept leading to the next step. So I never had any plan to any further out than a day or two. It's strange, especially if this podcast is for teachers to try to plan out what they're going to do. My plan is or was I didn't really plan for anything. I just trusted. I had a faith that I would be taken care of, not by other people, but by my practice, by the work that I was doing, the sincerity, the earnestness of what I was doing. It was coming from an authentic place. I felt like it was purposeful. It was my dharma. It was my truth. And and so I didn't feel scared. There was no fear, like, what's going to happen? How am I going to pay the rent? Those thoughts are there, but at the same time, it was just keep doing the next right thing, and the next more will be revealed. Just keep moving, just keep moving. And that's what happened. Was things kept showing up, people kept showing up. Hey, do you want to teach here? Hey, I have this opportunity, or I have a private client, and things kept happening that way. And that's how I started to put together a career, if you will. I didn't know that this was what that was supposed to be. I'm not sure that's what I planned on doing, but almost 15 years later, I guess that's what happened.
So I'm assuming in the beginning you still had different jobs, like you were saying earlier, waiting tables or doing that, like this little thing here and there, and you were still teaching yoga, and maybe slowly you were able to find opportunities or start teaching more and more yoga and less of other type of work.
Right. Yeah, I was watching my budget. I looked at my income, my expenses, and I knew how much I needed to make each month in LA to cover my rent and food, and so I would make sure to have certain jobs that I could take. And so that one was a restaurant where I would pick up shifts as a waiter. Another job I would do was background work on commercials. You're an extra. So I was a union member, SAG, Screen Actors Guild. So I'd done some acting work in the past. So I used that to get some work. And so I would do odd jobs here and there. And at the same time, I would teach 10 to 15 classes a week all over Los Angeles, wherever I could. And one class would be at a gym. It would just be called yoga. That's the name on the schedule. Another class would be at a studio, and all of a sudden it's Vinyasa Yoga level 2. And then I do something with a private client who had lower back issues. And then I was collecting unemployment as well at the same time. So it was a very humble beginning where had to watch how much money I had, how much I could spend, and make enough to cover my expenses. And I wouldn't trade the experience, but it wasn't easy either. It was pretty tough early on. But again, the trust and the faith that I couldn't fathom that I would come that far and all of a sudden be left stranded. I'd come that far in my recovery. I've been sober now for a year, and be that far ahead in my training to all of a sudden be left abandoned by the universe, by God. So I just kept trusting, and the more I trusted, the more that was given to me. The more trust, I was like, well, this is amazing. I'll just keep going, just keep going. So yeah, I worked a lot of different jobs.
And I guess what was your family, friends reacted to you kind of like, I'm going to do a teacher training and now I'm going to start teaching yoga? Were they all supportive, or was anybody surprised?
I had friends I told, and they weren't surprised because that's all I was doing when I was getting sober. Was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You just do yoga every day, so of course you would do a training. And family wasn't so much involved. I was 35 at the time when I did that first training with Saul, and so I did call my dad at one point. I told him about it, and we talked about it. Because I think it was more of a financial thing. I said, yeah, I guess I'll just put it on my credit card, and then I'll just pay off That's another thing I was doing during the time was I was holding a balance on my credit cards. So I was actually spending more than I was making, but using credit cards, I was able to, I don't recommend this to anybody, but this is just what I had to do to survive was just keep charging things and then just pay it off when I could. Eventually I finally did pay off all that debt, but, so I figured with the teacher training, I didn't have that kind of money at the time. And so I remember talking to my dad. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll just have to charge it. And I guess I'll just pay it back whenever I can. I'll pay the minimum on my card, and uh, I don't think I talked to my brother or sister. So it was more of a thing where I was at an age where it was just, it was my decision. And I did have friends that I talked to that were very supportive, uh, friends that were more into yoga than my dad, for example. He's not a yogi. So, he's not really, he's not sure what to share or what to offer as advice when I say, I'm going to do this training or this 200 hour or this 500 hour. He doesn't know what that means. So I talked to other teachers as well, and they were supportive.
And I know I read in your bio that you're also a yoga therapist.
I have done therapeutic work. So I've been working at a treatment center for addiction recovery for 12 years. So sometimes it's described as yoga therapy, the types of classes that we do. Technically, the International Association of Yoga Therapists has a qualification or certification for yoga therapy. I have not done one of their programs. But a lot of the work that I've done, a lot of workshops I've done, have been on the therapeutic side. So I'm on the therapeutic team, the clinical team. We're at the treatment center where I work. So that's where the therapy piece comes in, because a lot of what we do, where I work specifically, is we'll do yoga, but then we talk about our experience. We share what we may have felt during the practice at a somatic level, at the heart level, at just the emotional level. And that's where the therapeutic piece comes in. I think that's why many, if not all, of the treatment centers that I'm familiar with, they usually have a yoga class on the schedule for their patients. There's nothing, I think, that's more powerful to quiet the mind, to heal the body, to connect to the spirit. So that's the therapeutic piece.
Yeah, and it seems like from what you shared from the beginning when you first became a yoga teacher, you had a desire to teach yoga in those spaces or people recovering or people on that journey of sobriety. So how did you kind of work your way to getting the teaching position at the recovery center?
This is another funny story where it probably shouldn't have happened, but it did. So I reached out once I was teaching to all of the treatment centers and similar types of facilities in the Los Angeles area, sober living homes, things like that. And nobody would reply, or they already had a teacher and no one was interested. And so here I am saying, I would love to teach for you. And nobody wants me to teach for them. And so I'm still teaching my classes at the gym and at the studio. And I would reach out again, and I would call a few, and I would email a few, and I'd ask around, does anyone know anyone? Maybe there's some networking I can do. And so finally this thought comes to me. It might have been in a meditation, or maybe I was out for a walk somewhere, that just do it. Why are you waiting for permission? If you want to teach to people in recovery, then teach to people in recovery. And it was like this thunderbolt that just shot through me that, yeah, why am I waiting for someone to say that I can do this? Why don't I just do it? It wasn't a prideful or egoic thing. I wasn't saying I'm the best teacher, I'm the man for this. It was just the next right thing for me. It came to me as an intuitive thought. So I thought, well, where could I do it? And I remembered the classes in the park. And I remembered how other people had set up these community free donation. And I thought, that's it. I'll just find a space where we can do this, and I'll just create these classes. And again, it was just the next thing. So I found a church in West Hollywood that was friendly to 12-step groups. They had meetings there, and I had a meeting with the pastor, and I asked if we can do like a 12-step yoga class. He said, what's that? I said, I'm not sure, but we'll figure it out. And he said, okay, you can have Tuesday nights. We have a spot open. I said, great. So I just started telling people in recovery that there's going to be a class for people in recovery at this church. It was on Fountain and Fairfax, if anyone's from the West Hollywood area. And people started coming. And so I started teaching that class every week. And I did that for about 2.5 years or so. So in the moment you're just teaching, or at least I was just teaching, and I'm not sure what I'm doing, except it just feels like the right thing. Just show up and people keep coming. I didn't realize until much later. That's where I found my voice as a teacher. I started to realize how to hold space, like Saul did, how to play music, how to use the right terms and the right mantras and the right mudras and the right ambiance, how to light some candles, how to actually create a safe space for people that may not have another space like this. This may be the only time they have a chance to actually be in their bodies in a safe place. And that's where I got a chance to figure that out. Figured out I found my voice, who I am, what I'm here to be. And so that's what actually led me to finally getting a job, a paid job, because I didn't take a salary for that. That was by donation, just so we could pay the rent. We passed a basket and all the money went to the church. I didn't take a salary, that was for service. And after doing that about 2 years, 2.5 years, somewhere in there, a new student came and she loved the class. And afterwards she said, "You should teach this where I work." And I asked her where she worked, and it was one of the rehabs that I had been emailing for a couple of years. I said, "They won't get back to me. I keep reaching out." She goes, "I work there. Use my name." And so I did. I reached out and used her name. And that's the rehab where I've been working for the last 12 years. So it worked out.
Oh, thank you for sharing that journey and step by step. And I have seen yoga studios offering workshop on, or doesn't have to be yoga studio, but offering yoga like workshop or like series on 12 step in yoga. And is there a specific training you did to be able to teach that? Or you said you kind of like found your voice there, kind of trials and errors maybe. So I'm curious about how, for you, when you teach that, what, how do you teach it? How is this maybe different than maybe what typical yoga class that people imagine would be at a yoga studio? And is there any specific approach or philosophy you have to that?
I'm glad you asked that. And it's a really great question, because when I talked to the pastor, when I said we're going to do something like a 12-step yoga, and he asked what that was, I said, "I'm not sure, but we'll figure it out." And before I started teaching the first class, what came to me was, I have experienced the 12 steps. Most of the people that are going to be coming probably also have some awareness of what the 12 steps are. So here's what I'll do. I'll pair each step with a pose. And as we go through each pose, I'll talk about the principles or qualities of the step and how it relates to the physicality of this posture. For example, step one, we talk about being powerless and having unmanageability in our lives. So we would start maybe in Shavasana. And we talk about how you're laying there, the sense of powerlessness. You're just laying there on the ground, the sense of unmanageability, that you can't get up for whatever reason. You're stuck, you're down, you're heavy, whatever it might be. And so I started to go through each of the classes that way, where I'd go through all 12 steps based on my experience, my awareness, my personal experience of going through the steps, and then helping other men get through the steps as a sponsor. And I did that for a while. And then sometimes here and there, I would just teach a regular vinyasa flow class, leave the step work and the philosophy part out of it. But I'm glad you asked, because I haven't thought of that in a while, and I haven't done that in a while either. It was a phase. It was beneficial personally, because the more I talked about it, the more I understood and learned. It wasn't just something I did when I first got sober. Every week I was going through the steps again, all 12 steps in one night. And I was taking all the students through all 12 steps. So what was interesting is most of them were newly sober. Some had some time sober, but we all benefit from going through the steps, not just going through with a book, not at a 12-step meeting, but we're using our bodies, we're using the movements, we're using the breath, and we're connecting how the steps are universal in nature, just like the principles, the yamas, the niyamas, the moral codes, the self-disciplines of yoga are universal by nature. And we were finding these similarities between, like I said, powerlessness. Okay, well, that's like Shavasana. Or there's courage. Well, that's like Warrior Two. You started putting these characteristics and these principles with these poses. And so I did that for the first few years. And I started to do that here and there at the treatment centers, but some treatment centers want to not stay away from the 12 steps, but they maybe just want something simple. They don't want the patients or clients to think too much about 12-step work. So I haven't done that in a while, but there's a recording here or there somewhere online. I recorded some of those, the audio. Somebody had asked me to do that, so they're floating around somewhere.
Thank you for explaining that. That is because I'm not familiar with those 12 steps or yoga for 12 steps. So it gave me some visuals to that I can think about and I could think about different examples. So thank you for that. And I'm curious, from the time you graduated from teacher training till the point that you feel like you were, and now I am in this path of teaching yoga or meditation, and you feel like you're consistent and stable in that path. Because that's the question I get from newer teacher a lot. It's like, how long did it take from the time you graduated till you are comfortable in this career path that you don't have to be struggling and finding different jobs all the time to kind of supplement?
I think financially it took a few years, 2 or 3 years or so. And then just with my own style of teaching, within that first 2 or 3 years, I also created some classes at a park out in Santa Monica for free, a donation on Saturday and Sunday morning. So I was also trying a lot of different things. So I had the 12-step yoga at the church. It was called Strand Street Yoga because that's where the park was, off of Strand Street in Santa Monica. So I had that going on the weekends. I started doing some things online, like recording guided meditations and putting those out into the world. And it was a lot of trial and error and just noticing which studios or classes or types of communities I liked working with and which ones uh, where I really felt useful. There's certain classes where so many teachers, we can all teach a vinyasa flow class, for example, but I'm not sure if as many teachers can actually go into a treatment center or work with people who are detoxing. So that's where I started to differentiate myself, meaning that there are so many teachers that can teach at the gym and studio. Um, I'm not sure if that's where I'm supposed to be because, for better or for worse, whether I like it or not, I'm uniquely qualified to go into a treatment center. I can talk to someone who's got 2 days sober because I've been there, and I can share with them how yoga really helped me in my early recovery because that's how I processed grief and depression and anger and fear. It was on my yoga mat, so I can share that. And I did that work in that church. So that's when I started to move toward teaching specifically, not only in treatment, but most of the work I was doing was there. So, and then eventually it ended up just being that, in addition to some things on the side that again started to come. Uh, it was never my plan to create audio courses, for example, but now I have 13 audio courses on Insight Timer, and writing a book really wasn't my idea either. That was the next thing as well. So I wrote that. So all this stuff starts to come. But today I do make my living as a yoga teacher. It took 2 or 3 years or so, trial and error, and a lot of faith. Going back to that piece. I don't mean faith in God or Jesus or Buddha or Christian. It doesn't have to be religious faith. It's just Shraddha, right? It's his faith in maybe your inner self. Maybe it's just that your inner light, or just what feels right energetically. Maybe there's just a faith that go right instead of going left. There's just something intuitive about that. That's really what I was hooking into. Was this feels like the next thing? I'll just do this.
Yeah, I love how you said it. Just, I guess what you're talking about is like niching down, but you have that personal experience and you had the desire to want to work with that people, that population. And it was kind of like natural progression of slowly leading up to that and almost having your own specialty that makes you stand out. You become that expert in that topic. So other people will probably like when they're seeking for, or like, I feel like it works in referral in yoga. It's like, oh, I know a teacher that I can recommend who specializes in back pain, or oh, I know a teacher who this is, Brian's thing is working with people in recovery. So having that like little niche that you have that you offer, I think can be super helpful. And for you, it seems like there was natural calling and desire to work with that population already. I want to talk about Insight Timer. I saw you talk about Insight Timer, and that's something I had Insight Timer as an app for a while to use it as meditation, but I also recently interviewed a teacher who's also do so well on Insight Timer. And she's like, this is an untapped area for yoga teachers and meditation teachers. It's like, actually, you can make it really, but there's potential to make good supplementary income. And what is the word I'm looking for? Um, it'll come to me. But anyway, so you have Insight Timer, you have courses on there. How has your experience been working offering courses and meditations, maybe lectures. I don't know what you offer on Insight Timer. When did you start it? And, what's the potential for yoga teachers to be able to reach new students, maybe earn some income on the app Insight Timer?
It's a wonderful app. They reached out to me actually early on. One of their employees, um, I'm guessing she found one of those meditations I had recorded and put somewhere else. I think I had a few things on SoundCloud, and I'm guessing she saw that. I also I had some classes on Yoga 30, which was a yoga site. They're not up anymore. And I had a course on Udemy. It's a meditation course, which I made free. It's still free. It's still up there. So somewhere in there, somebody from Insight Timer reached out and asked if I would contribute some meditations. At the time, I wasn't using apps. I didn't really know what they were, to be honest. And so I just said, thank you for your email. I'll look into this. And I never did. And a few years went by, and I didn't think about it, but somebody had brought up Insight Timer, and I remembered, I think that's the company that reached out, but now they had over 1 million downloads or 2 million downloads. It was really popular. And I saw they had all these meditations. So I recorded a few, three actually, three meditations, and I sent them in, and they were being played. And what was amazing was it's a very interactive app. So people who listen they can review and they can comment on what they're listening to. So I was getting feedback, comments, and reviews from Australia and Hong Kong and Singapore and Canada. And I thought, this is incredible. In my lifetime, I will probably never get a chance to teach to so many people internationally around the world. But just by recording these things at home and putting them on this app, I'm getting to share with so many people. So I started recording some more meditations because I realized, like, wow, there is quite a quite a platform here if you want to reach other people. And what I love is they have it free. It's still free. The app is free. There is a premium section. That's where the courses are, and it's only $5. It's still affordable. It's $5 a month. It's affordable for most people. And so I put more meditations on there. And early on, there was no income derived from that. So teachers weren't getting paid. They would tell us as teachers, somewhere in the future, we'll probably be able to offer royalties or residual payments. And that happened. It took a little while. And after a while, after the meditations were up, they decided to add courses. And that was going to be the first tier or the beginning of the premium section. And so I created it. My first course was about gratitude. And then I started this is where I had to go back to my intention, because we were being told that most listeners are listening to tracks, recordings about stress and how to sleep and things like that. So anyone who's into marketing or branding or promotion or publicity would realize, okay, I better do a course about sleep or stress or anxiety. That's where I'm going to hit the most people. But luckily, my yoga training kicked in, if you will, and I realized that's not my intention. I don't need to be the most popular teacher here, because I already gave that up, deciding to just teach in treatment, because that was something I realized if I was just going to teach in treatment centers and for recovery, I'm not going to be on the cover of Yoga Journal. I'm not going to be the most popular yoga teacher, and I had to let go of that idea that I was somehow going to be in that mix. I'm probably going to do a lot of invisible work and no one's going to see it. And am I okay with that? And my answer was, yeah. And actually it's so much easier. It's a lot easier just to, like you said, find your niche, like just find your specialty and just do that. And then so my next course was about the yamas and niyamas. It was called Yogic Principles for Transformation. My next one was Yogic Wisdom for Modern Times. And then I recorded Recovery, Principles for a Purposeful Life. So I dug in, I put all my chips in on my specialty, which was yoga, philosophy specifically, and recovery. And the 30-day course I created for Insight Timer, Recovery, Principles for a Purposeful Life. Again, this is how the universe works. I had a couple of students comment that this course should be a book. This would make a great book. I would love to hold this in my hands and have the pages and be able to write in the margins. This would be a great book. So I saw that about 4 or 5 or 6 times. And I thought, I guess so. I could do that. It's all right. So I looked up how to write a book proposal, and I did that. I found a And this is going to seem like it was easy the way I say it. I found an agent, we found a publisher, I got a book deal, it's out in the world. It wasn't that easy, but that's basically, those are the steps. I wrote a book proposal, but that all came from my Insight Timer course, just the idea that that was out there. So creating content for courses, for apps like that, there's so much potential to take that and repurpose it to do something else with it. So you have a meditation, guess what? Somebody hears it, somebody sees it, they invite you to do something else. Then you take that something else, then you turn that into something else. And all of a sudden you're in an article for this website, and then you're interviewed on this podcast, and then you write it. Everything's, if you're in the right genre, if you stay in your lane. And so Insight Timer has been great. It's, and now, yeah, and every month I do receive payments for the plays, so all of the recordings, which are, for me, it's my meditations. I have a few talks, Dharma talks, wisdom talks, if you will, and the courses. And it's interactive, so if any students want to ask questions in the courses, I can moderate the course classroom. So I go in there every day. It's a commitment that I've made to the students, to myself, to be accountable, that if someone is asking a question about something that I shared in a lesson, within 24 to 48 hours, I'll reply. I'll answer the question personally.
Thank you for sharing that. The word I was looking for is passive income.
Yeah, that's it.
So you have created 13 courses in meditation that you put up on there, and that is, like you said, you still go in every day and check and respond, which I think is amazing. But once you made it and it's on there, you are able, there's a potential ability for teachers to continue to earn money from the app every month if, your course is popular or people are enjoying it. That's amazing to hear. And how long ago was it that you created these courses, and do you still continue to create more content, courses, or meditation on the app, or are you kind of only when you have ideas that you want to get it out there?
Usually when an idea comes, I don't have any need to have more courses or to create anything. So recently, a couple months ago, usually these ideas come to me when I'm not expecting them. So I think I was out for a walk and I thought about, something came to me, an idea about sobriety, and how, actually similar to the theme of what this podcast is. Like, if a new yoga teacher wants to know how to build a career and be a teacher, like is there a Q&A out there? Or is there some sort of forum that they can hook into? Is there some place where they can get some answers? So that's sort of what came to me, was a sobriety Q&A. I've been sober 15 years now. So there's a lot of people who may not know how to achieve sobriety, what it may. I didn't know the difference, what sobriety, what recovery, what spirituality, what religion. I didn't know what 12-step was. I didn't know what rehab versus a sober living. I had no idea. I had to just figure it out on my own. And so I created a course recently, a 10-day course, and it's a Q&A. So I took 10 questions that I hear a lot in professionally, working Monday through Friday, where I work at the treatment center, and then stuff I just hear in my own personal recovery, just questions newcomers usually ask, like, how do you get sober? How do you stay sober? What's recovery? What do you do? Do you need to be spiritual to be sober? Or how do you pray? How do you meditate? How many meetings do you go to? Can you make up your own? So that's something that I created recently. So I'll create a new course if I feel called to, if something comes through, meaning, it's not some weird cosmic mystical thing. All of a sudden, like I said, I'm walking, an idea comes, like, you know what? Yeah. If it comes, then I probably should do something with it. I don't want to regret that, someone else will do it, or I'll just do it later. I think it came for a reason. And I guess I've been around long enough where these things do lead to something, and it's none of my business where they lead. And I don't mean that in a glib way. I'm in the action business, God's in the results business. So my job, just record the course, put it online. That's it. If people love it, if you have 1 million listeners and students, or if you have 2, either way, I did what I was supposed to do. That course, I think we have about 80 students now. It just came out a couple of weeks ago. So I still create courses. If the right idea comes and I actually feel that I have something unique and authentic to contribute to that topic, but I don't think I'll be, trying to to up my numbers anytime soon, because we get caught up in that. How many followers, how many students, how many this, how many that, how many likes, and we have those numbers on Insight Timer. And I stopped looking a while ago because I don't think it's in the interest of any conscious creator to be that invested in. If we sacrifice our individuality and our authenticity, because like I said, I can create courses about sleep and I know I'll get more numbers, I'll get more people, more followers, but I don't know if I'll be able to sleep at night knowing that that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it sounds like from hearing your stories from the very beginning to now, you are very good at listening to what life comes or brings to you or opportunity that rises. And you, like you said, you're going to continue to do what needs to be done each day or each phases of this path you're in, and you're also listening to what people are wanting or what kind of like you said, some people said they should be a book about this, you wrote a book about it, or people ask questions, you're listening to these questions, so now you have a Q&A. So you're very good at listening and then responding to the want or need out there from your students or from your community. So I love hearing that, because it's not like, it doesn't feel like it's forceful. It doesn't feel like you're trying to like forcefully create something or put something out there in the world. You're just kind of listening and trying to do the best you can every day and kind of see where it leads each time.
Yeah, and the most that comes from meditation. That was the one piece that was missing from my personal recovery. I didn't start meditating until I was 14 months sober. I don't recommend that. Anyone who's in recovery, you can start on day one. And then any yoga teachers, please have a meditation practice. It will serve you in so many ways. I had no idea what it was just to be with myself in stillness and in silence. And then when I started that practice, I haven't stopped. So I've been meditating since I had about 14 months sober. So yeah, it's been almost 15 years. It's 14 or so. So it's something I wouldn't do without. And those are the moments when my mind is quiet enough where those messages come through. I can actually, I'm alert and I'm aware and I'm open. I can see the difference, whether it's my ego saying you should go do this, or if it's something that's really coming from a different place. Or maybe you should do this. A lot of times not doing anything comes up as the next action for me, because a lot of us, especially newer yoga teachers, be careful with burning out. I don't know if we're talking about that enough these days, where we try to teach 25 classes a week. I did that 21 classes a week for a little while early on. And I thought, well, that's what you got to do. You got to pay your dues. You got to get the experience. You got to be relevant. You got to be at every studio, and everyone has to know where you are and who you are, and they got to get a taste of your teachings. And what happens is, or at least in my case, is I start to get resentful at my teachings, at the studios, at the students, my body's starting to get sore and break down. And so I had to scale back. So now I teach 10 classes. But I've gone up and down the scale where it was, I don't recommend. 21 was the most I had every week, 4 or 5 a day. And it was too much for me. Everyone has their own threshold, but that ended up being way too much.
No, I can totally relate to what you said about resentment. When I started teaching too many classes, say yes to too many commitments, I start resenting maybe the people I work with, or myself or my partner. Like you just start to feel more resentful about the little things, or the drive to get to the studio, or the parking that you have to look for. And I just have too much on my plate. I need to create more spaciousness in my schedule. So definitely I can relate to that. And I feel like burnout in yoga teaching life is something I feel like it almost comes up in every interview I do, because maybe we all go through certain stages of burnout to realize this is my threshold and I can't surpass that. So definitely. You said you teach about 10 classes a week now. I know you said you teach at the treatment center. What other places, or online, or what other classes do you teach?
Right now I teach Monday through Friday. 2 classes a day, and that's all I do in person. And then each day, 2 or 3 times a day, I get online. I check all of my courses on Insight Timer to see if there's any comments or questions. And I also check, then I do my computer type stuff, emails and things like that for the book that came out. But right now, I just teach those 10 classes, and that's it for now. I've been offered some different classes and other opportunities to teach, and if it's aligned with what I'm doing, I'll do it. For example, next weekend, I'll be giving a talk at an event. Lululemon is producing it. And then in April, there's a healing and wellness expo event at a local hotel. So I'll be there. So if it's something that I feel that where I can bring something specific and unique and purposeful, then I'll do it. And some of these things are paid. So there's some extra income there as well. A lot of teachers like to know, like, how do you get paid for that? Are you paid to be an ambassador, or do you get paid for that endorsement, or are you a brand this and marketing that? And so but right now I teach those 10 classes, and that's good. The other thing that I've been doing is balancing. I think there's probably going to be some listeners that are parents. So my daughter is 10 years old. So if I'm teaching 21 classes a week, I'm making a huge sacrifice, because I probably won't be able to see my daughter when I'm in the car driving to that studio on that night when I could be home having dinner or tucking her into bed. So that was a conscious decision that I made a few years ago, which was if I work a certain amount of hours, certain times of the day, I could still pick my daughter up from school and maximize my time with her. And so that's another reason why I'm working 10 classes a week right now, and where I'm working as well, as opposed to being all over the place and spreading myself out. And so it was a decision that I made to spend more time with my daughter as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I guess kind of wrapping up, I do have a couple more questions. First thing is, what kind of advice would you give to new teachers who's starting out this journey of being a yoga teacher? And is there any advice that somebody gave you when you were in this journey that helped you, or maybe a challenges that you overcame, or mistakes you have made that now you feel like you have this wisdom to share with the newer teachers?
The advice I would give would be to know your why. Why are you teaching? If I were to mentor newer teachers, I've been teaching almost 15 years now. So if I were to be with a group of newer teachers, I would simply ask, why are you teaching? Why are you here? What brought you to this training? What are you looking to do with your training, with your experience now? I think that's what Saul asked us. The first night of our teacher training was we sat in a circle, and he asked why we were there. And so was a question similar to that, where I actually had to stop and think, why am I here? What am I doing here? I think it's huge, because it sets the foundation stone for the path that you're on. Why are you there? Are you just taking a training because there's so many reasons? But when you can be specific, and only each person can do it, you have to do it for yourself. I had to do it for myself. And that's where I came up with the idea that I would want to bring the healing benefits of yoga to people in places they can't get to it, and to make it accessible and affordable. And then later I added in people in treatment, and I brought that to my intention. So I'd ask why, sit with that as a question, meditate on that. There's no right or wrong answer. So if it is, I got nothing else to do, I just lost my job, whatever it might be, there's no wrong answer, but at least have an idea of why. Because what will happen if you do begin teaching is your students will feel your why. So if you're just there because you have nothing else to do, they're going to feel that. And we have to be really careful of what we're transmitting. So if you're transmitting your carelessness, your restlessness, or your irritability, or your sense of incompleteness as a teacher to the room, be careful with that. Know why you're there. If you're there to help uplift others, they'll feel that. If you're there to encourage others, they'll feel that, and they'll leave the class empowered and courageous. So, yeah, definitely each teacher, anyone who's new, or anyone who's been teaching a while, maybe lost their way or is burnt out, maybe revisit your why, your intention. And then as far as any teachers that may have given me advice, In the back of, I didn't read the whole manual, I have to admit it. So we got this big, huge, thick teacher training manual. When I did my first training, I didn't read the whole thing. It was too much. But at the very end, there were some bullet points. It said basically like things to know on your teaching journey. And there were just bullet points. And there was just one that I remembered that was just so powerful. Teach what you know. So it wasn't technically advice someone gave me. It was written down, but that came from the manual and the teacher training I did with Saul. Teach what you know. So if all I know is, let's say I'm only teaching for 6 months, then just teach as a teacher with 6 months experience. Don't pretend you know more or don't pretend you know less. Just be you. Be authentic. Share what you know. If you don't know the Bhagavad Gita, don't talk about it. If you haven't read the Upanishads, don't talk about them. If you're not sure about the Sanskrit, don't mention it. Teach what you know. So if you know recovery, teach about recovery. If you know about somatics or kinesiology, teach those things. Teach what you know. And that's how students will know you. They're going to know you through what you know, and you're going to reinforce it within yourself by teaching that. Because a lot of us will start to teach things that we don't know, and it's going to feel really phony. And students know that right away. They're going to tell. They're not going to like something off about that teacher, and the teacher's not being their true self. That's what's really off. So teach what you know. It's probably the best advice I got, and it was written in the back of the manual.
I love that. Teach what you know. I think, I heard of it before, or maybe heard somebody say that before, or maybe somebody told me when I was a newer teacher. I don't remember, but teach what you know is something I still think about. And I also advise with newer teachers. Yeah, like you said, it's not going to come out authentic when you're trying to be someone else or trying to say the things that you don't have a lot of knowledge about yet. I always say, like with sequencing, keep it simple and just teach the way that you can do it well and simply. You don't have to get fancy or super unique sequence, especially in the beginning. I think it's teaching what you know and keeping it simple. I think it's definitely important. And I feel like maybe longer I teach, in my experience, my teaching gets even more simpler and simpler.
Yeah.
And another question I have is, what does success mean to you as a yoga teacher?
Success, I would say it's being authentic, being my true self, being the same person I am in the yoga studio or wherever I'm teaching, and then being the same person at home with my daughter, being the same person at the grocery store, at the gas station, or at the shopping mall. That's a successful way of being for me. So yoga, it's a way of being. I would hear people say these types of things early on. And I thought, it sounded nice. It was very, it had a good ring to it. It sounded very spiritual, but over the years, like you said, things get simpler. And so it does become either you're a yogi or you're not. There's no turning it off. You don't put on a hat before you go into the studio, your yoga teacher hat, and then you teach the class. And as soon as you leave, you don't take the hat off and then become back to your old. There is no different self. You're the same person. So that's a definition of success, is that you're able to live that authentically, the same person. You speak the same way to the people that you meet, whether it's a student, whether it's a supervisor, a CEO of a company, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's your enemy. You're going to speak the same way. You're going to listen the same way. You're going to respect everyone the same way. That's a successful way to be a teacher in the world, which is you model a way of being. So your students will see something that they find attractive, and they will want to not emulate. They're not going to try to be you or copy you, but the whole point of being a teacher is to share something, teach something that's worthy of being learned. We're not just up there just memorizing scripts and then sharing them. It's not a play. It's not like, off-Broadway production. It's one of the most amazing things as a teacher is getting in front of a group. That's a successful class, is when you get up there and you just talk and you just do your thing and you trust your process and you share and you're present, your heart is open, your mind is open. And if the students seem to be content and happy and at peace, you're a success.
Beautifully said. Thank you for saying that. And is there anything, any questions that I missed or didn't ask, or anything that you still have desire to say, share, or I don't know, share with the listeners before we close out and ask you how they can find you?
I would share that my personal practice has changed over the years. So my teaching has changed and my personal practice has changed, and it's okay. I don't remember any teachers or hearing any other teachers saying that it's okay not to practice. I would always hear you have to have your own practice or you'll have nothing to teach. I heard things like that. And what's happened is being a parent or you have different responsibilities, you can't get out to the studio. You can't practice 5 or 6 times a week. You can't do a 90-minute vinyasa flow. You can't do a 60-minute lunch session. So my personal practice lately has been about a 25 to 35 minute, very gentle, restorative at home practice on Saturday and Sunday morning. I lay a towel out on my carpet in my living room and I don't have a set sequence. I just do some very gentle movement. 20 years ago, I was doing power yoga, handstands, arm balances and inversions, and I was sweating and I was all over the place. That's not where I am today. So I would share that it's okay, because it's been my experience, to listen to your body, listen to where you are, whatever season or chapter of life you're in, honor that. If you can just do 25 or 30 minutes because you have to do something else, or you just don't have the energy or don't feel like it, or you don't feel inspired to go back to those old practices, that's where the disconnect happens. We start to judge ourselves, or we have this discrimination that I used to do it like this. I see this all the time. There's so many students I've met that I used to be so much stronger. I don't have any balance anymore. As if now they're weak and now they're not worthy of practicing because in the past they had a different practice and that was the strong practice. And now their practice today is weak, especially working in a treatment center. We have a lot of patients they don't have their balance. They don't feel centered. They don't feel calm. And they're remembering in the past when they had a practice that was stronger and it gave them so much strength. It's okay. It's okay to change your practice as a student and especially as a teacher. And you will still have something to give in your teachings as long as you're still meditating, as long as you're still living this type of lifestyle. You'll have plenty to give. Just keep being yourself. Yeah, so I used to hear that early on. How many classes are you teaching, or how many classes are you taking? You got to, take as many as you're teaching and things like this. And I'm not doing that these days. I'm only sharing my experience. I would never give a suggestion that somebody should only do Saturday and Sunday morning or only do restorative. But I don't think it's a coincidence, because I heard a teacher about 10, 15 years ago, a really well-known teacher, somebody asked him, we had a little Q&A after the session, it was a workshop, and they said, what do you do for your practice? And he said something similar. He goes, I only do restorative. And I remember thinking, wow, that's it? Because I was in my power yoga mode during those years. And I couldn't believe it. This teacher who was so well known just did restorative. Yeah, that's a very smart teacher, the one who knows how to listen to where they are. So I would suggest that be open to that as a teacher, that if you are tired, you don't have to practice. Go for a walk, go for a hike, take a nap.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like not that people need permission from, somebody else, but it's almost affirming to hear somebody else who's been teaching for a long time to say that. And if that can allow somebody also to feel the permission to, like, okay, it's okay that I don't do my 90-minute practice every day. It's okay. I just want to do 20-minute restorative pose today or a couple times a week. I think that's very important. When I took Judy Lassiter's restorative yoga teacher training, one of her homework for us was like, you have to do 20 minutes of shavasana every day during this training. Every single day, 20 minutes shavasana. That's the homework. And it was very challenging to do, because I could think of so many things I could be doing instead, but it was very powerful to make sure I gave myself 20 minutes shavasana every day. So definitely there's power to listening to your body. And if your body needs to rest or do restorative yoga, I think that's also such a powerful practice for sure. Thank you, Brian, for sharing all of that and all the great wisdoms and even sharing your journey. I'm sure I learned a lot, and I'm sure listeners got so much out of it. So please tell the listeners, share with the listeners how they can find you, and any upcoming offerings or anything you want to share with them.
My website is brianhymanyoga.com, BrianHyman, yoga.com. You can look me up on Insight Timer. I have content there. My book is called Recovery with Yoga, Supportive Practices for Transcending Addiction. And Instagram, Facebook, you could find me online as well. And yeah, feel free to reach out and ask questions. Definitely my pleasure to try to help anyone that I could help. That's why I love this podcast. Like I said earlier, there was nothing like this. There may have been, I just wasn't aware of anything. So I really kind of had to not chart my own course. There were a lot of people who helped me, but if I could be any help to anyone, just let me know. I'll do my best.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll make sure to link all of that on the show notes so people can easily click the link and find out and find you, follow you that way. Yeah, Brian, thank you so much. I really appreciate this time and conversation we had. And hopefully I'll be able to meet you in person someday.
Well, thank you. You're awesome. I love this podcast. Keep it up. Keep going. Keep sharing.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation I had with Brian. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and also got something out of it. Thank you, Brian, so much for coming on the show and to chat with me. I'm going to make this outro also short. So if you enjoy the podcast, the best thing you can do is to share this podcast with your fellow yoga teacher friends, coworkers, or anyone you think will benefit from listening to this podcast. Or you can also rate, review, or star this podcast wherever platform you're listening to. And if you want to reach out to me, connect with me, Instagram is where I am most active. So my Instagram handle is at Reika Yoga, and you can also message me through my website, www.reikayoga.com. And all the links related to this episode will be in the show notes. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye.